I think, yeah, I'm glad, Nick, that you went forward. I think it's really good to think of AI as omnipresent, as you said while we were chatting. I do think moving forward, a lot of our projects and how we approach technology will have like an AI component to it, and that's what we're seeing. So what I'm really going to focus on, and you see my slides, right, Marco? It's there. Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm trying to move this. 1 second here. So my focus as someone that works with technology and being a technology developer, I've done a lot of work within the public sector and nonprofit space trying to implement technology projects. So I'm going to go through some of the examples this year where I've used AI specifically to improve either the efficiency of something or to sort of reimagine what service delivery may potentially look like. And in terms of the technologies that I'm specifically speaking to, I'm talking about the use of generative artificial intelligence. So this is, the ChatGPTs of the world. So all of these very large language models that you can kind of manipulate to do something that is very specific to your organization. And then the next, I think, stepping stone, which everyone is going to see in 2025 onwards, is the use of agents within these larger language models. So how can we take, for example, something like ChatGPT, but make it do very specific tasks that we need very specific outputs for. So in moving forward, you're going to see very large agent systems combined to, build a lot of the technologies and address some of the issues you may be seeing, within your organizations in regards to digital technology. So one of the things that I've worked on is, we have a client. They are the Alberta International Medical Graduate Association. And working with them, we've built a digital platform called Ally, where we connect internationally trained medical graduates with a ton of things. Some of them include, a questionnaire to help them get licensed. The other things are, potential jobs in real time that they can find based on where they're located. And the way that we've implemented AI within this platform is, as folks review the questionnaire and answer the questionnaire, the outputs of those questionnaires are converted into keywords with AI. And then using those keywords, we recommend very specific job positions. So this is akin to, you going onto YouTube, and everyone's YouTube page looks very different because you've looked at different videos, you have different interests. That's exactly what we're building within this digital platform. So anyone coming in is going to see a job or a licensure pathway or an advisor in relationship to their interests. And AI, again, has the capacity to heavily personalize what a digital technology or a digital page looks like. So this is something in implementation, and we're going to be releasing this next year. The other example, and this is something that was started about 6 months ago, is we've been looking at creating advisors using our language, different language models. We're specifically using a family of models that's available through Facebook called Llama. And what we're doing with this is we're trying to create and mimic advisors. A lot of the times when you have advisors that are providing either resource navigation or limited mental health, they are very overburdened. A lot of the times they're doing very time-consuming wayfinding tasks, which AI has a lot of capacity to do. And then moving along that, AI also has the capacity to, work in a very personalized way and take someone from point A to point B while doing the resource navigation and providing mental health support. So that's what we've created. We call our system Happy. And the next couple of slides, I'm just going to show you examples of messages that we've shared with this advisory tool. So one thing to note here is Happy is completely text-based. So we've built it into SMS, so you don't need an account. It's sort of similar to a helpline, and you're able to chat with Happy at any point in time, 24/7, and you have access to any resources, no matter where you're located across Canada. So imagine if you were a refugee or a newcomer coming into any region, you have access to this number. It can help you figure out where to go. And then while it does that, it can also sort of walk you through any of the internal struggles that you're having as you do this sort of navigation. So for example, here I asked Happy that I'm looking for housing support. And one of the powers of AI really is it starts to, it's not a simple chatbot. It actually goes deeper than, okay, here are your housing supports based on your location data. It's looking to understand more about you. So the first thing Happy says here is, can you tell me a bit more about what you're looking for? Are you looking for something long-term? Are you looking for emergency shelter? So it's trying to place you and understand you a bit better before providing resources. These are all text messages. I'm just going to say that again because it's harder to notice here. But here again, I asked Happy about housing support, and we have contact information provided, as you can see, and this is all through text. So depending on the request, it can provide, contact, phone number, and address, hours of operation, and so on. So again, AI has the ability to take this information, personalize it, contextualize it, and provide it when it's needed, and not just have it available so that people come to it. It's through an interaction when information and resources are being delivered. Another piece around the use of AI that we've built in is memory. So if you look at this image right here where it says part 1 of 2, I had told Happy sometime initially in the conversation that my persona is of someone that's a single parent that can only afford a 2-bedroom apartment. And, I need to take care of my children and so on. And so Happy remembers that. And that's a huge part of AI, is allowing your clients to provide information only once, and then making sure that any future interaction takes into account all of that past case history. And you can do that now through AI in a very conversational format. So within this example, again, Happy is able to figure out what apartment complexes to go to. It's able to, connect you to organizations that can help you find affordable housing in case you are a refugee that's looking to find something very quickly. And as folks coming into Canada that are newer, you may not know how to take a bus in a given region. And Happy does that as well. It can figure out bus routes. It can help you figure out how to take the bus. And it's an end-to-end solution of all of the problems around, what it takes to navigate to a resource. What resource do you need? And then how did that resource go? So Happy's able to go through all of those pieces. Just switching a little bit away from the resource navigation, another thing that AI is building a lot of capability into is supporting mental health. So this example, we're working on a project to help folks post-incarceration find better jobs within communities and, better resource and employment. And one of the things that we know that folks struggle with, and anything to do with confidence or anything to do with finding opportunities, is your self-esteem and your confidence. So one of the things that Happy can do is you can talk to it about all of the struggles that you're facing. And it may not be a fully certified therapist, and we don't intend it to be, but what it can do is during the odd hours when no one else is available, you've built a system that has your guardrails and the way that you work put in to help communicate and maybe handhold a little bit during those bouts of lower mental health. And this is something a lot of the time there isn't enough time to focus on stuff like that. And AI has the capability of working through some pieces of this as we start to move forward. Another thing which I know is very interesting, and I was in Metropolis 2 weeks ago, and I attended a lot of sessions on the different helplines that are available. And one of the biggest issues across these helplines are how do you make sure that it can communicate in different languages? So now if you look at an AI system like Happy that's able to, take in the nuance of conversation and then do it in seconds in a different language, because that's the capacity that AI has, it can have a huge impact to how you deliver services. As long as you're able to, define a structure for the model, it's able to continue the conversations in whatever languages you choose. So on the slide here, I asked Happy to give me, its introduction message in the top 5 languages in Edmonton. And so the first thing that Happy did is it actually looked up the census within the Edmonton region, was able to understand what the top 5 languages are, and then presented me the introduction message in these languages. So it is, as we continue, and Nick, to your point, what is the future looking like? It is definitely digital, and it is definitely the ability for AI models to help with translation across different types of services. So that is something that we're going to be using, and we are seeing. This is a new slide that I added in. So we're actually working on a project to help folks with brain development disorders and comprehension of materials. So what I've learned from that in terms of the use of AI is AI has the capability of switching literacy, which I think is very important for those that are, just starting to learn English, or may have any kind of neurodiversity. They need information presented to them in a different way. So how do we make sure that we are considering things like this? So for example, on the slide here, we're working particularly with groups that have fetal alcohol syndrome disorder. And so within that group, there are issues with, just understanding and comprehending text for that is greater than grade 3. So we've adjusted the language to be at grade 3, so between grades 1 and 3. And we've also added in emojis to help orient a lot of those conversations. So a lot of the times, if folks are just connecting to, for example, as you can see, Boyle Street is indicated by a light bulb. And if they type light bulb, it still continues the conversation to getting that help that they may potentially need. So the ability of AI to kind of very heavily personalize depending on your audience is what's going to revolutionize the way we do service delivery, not only within settlement, but across all the sectors that we're going to see AI coming into. So I think I'll just end it here. I think one thing that is very clear to me in the work that I've been doing is, automating navigation, all of that wayfinding that can be taken care of by multiple technologies, including, what I have with Happy and the whole SMS combination. And then the other thing is AI keeps learning. It's going to learn about who you are and how you do the work, and it's going to learn about your clients. And you can use that to your advantage. So if you have a history of your clients, what their needs are, you can feed that into a model, and you can see a lot of, very dedicated, customized, personalized work, which would take you hours. But now it's going to happen very, very quickly. And again, under the protocols that your organization has. So you're able to add your touch into, that service delivery aspect. And then lastly, I think it's important, I didn't add my slide on being responsible and ethical, but a lot of the work that we're doing, we're building it directly with people that need it. So for example, we're working with women in prison to see how they use AI. Like, it's very important for us to not lose track of the clients that are going to be using this technology at the end of it. The way they use it, the way they interact with it, what they think of it is equally as important as how we're building and developing our models. So it's important to do it with all of the stakeholders involved, and you keep them involved in just the entire end-to-end development process, I would say. So yeah, that's it for me. I hope that was interesting enough to get us started into how we can potentially use technologies and what are some of the ways that you may see 2025 evolve, right? So.
Interesting enough to generate a buzz in the chat, Shay. So I'm going to go through some questions that we got there. So you might as well stay unmuted. The very first one is a quick and easy one. Is Happy available for public use currently?
Yes. So we're actually piloting with a couple of different folks, and it is available. So if folks do want it, I can give a number to access it later on. Yeah.
Awesome. So they can start testing it out.
Yeah, they can start testing it out.
And that's the other thing is you say a number because it's text, it's SMS texting. It's not a chatbot in the way that we've all been sort of conditioned to think of going to a website, entering ChatGPT.
Yes.
So that's something around accessibility that's really interesting. So there's a bunch of good questions that kind of come up related to your last point about guardrails and ethics and things like that. And to the people whose questions I'm raising, if I misrepresented or you want to add a follow-up, please use the raise hand feature and I'll call on you. You can unmute. But a few questions from Matthew. So the assumption here, if it's not being claimed to IRCC, if Happy is not claiming a service or support to IRCC, what are your impact considerations on the loss of data that iCare or IRCC uses as part of the justification for funding the sector to Treasury Board? I'm not sure if that's totally clear. Matthew, do you want to unmute and just kind of elaborate on that?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I know Shay, we've been able to speak many times over the past.
Sorry, Matthew, your audio is craptacular. Can you check that again? It was really hard to understand you.
Very, very robotic. We're in the future. Yeah.
Oh, now a little bit better.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, I promise that wasn't my AI avatar there. So thank you very much, Shay, for the presentation. Loved it. I know we've been able to speak for the past number of years on different topics, usually at conferences like this. So it's great to be able to see you chatting or see you here. For this question, it's that IRCC uses multiple data points and multiple streams of data to be able to help justify the type of funding that it will need from the Treasury Board in the sense of like the fiscal year or the coming fiscal years. When we look at a tool like this, while wonderful and helpful to be able to support individuals in their work, I'm wondering the type of impact and the type of impact scenarios it would have if, let's say, 30% or 20 or even 5% of services were no longer required because they were using an agent such as a Happy or similar without it being connected to a contribution agreement, or even if not connected to a contribution agreement, reported back to IRCC saying there was a person who represented that they needed knowledge of life in Canada and that a referral was made for knowledge of life in Canada. And that's kind of some of those representations we see, for example, like in the outcomes report, or in some of the statistics that IRCC reports as part of its performance measurement frameworks to the government, either the parliamentary side or the Treasury Board. Sorry for the long question, but yeah, I'm just wondering what the team's discussions have been like for that.
That's very interesting, Matthew. And I think Marco and Nick, you can definitely add your thoughts here too. You know, we started building this for the use within the justice system, Matthew. So we're using it within, you know, policing, corrections, that kind of area. And now we're moving into seeing how can settlement take a look at this. And I've done previous projects, as you know, Matthew, we've talked on, you know, digital transformation. What does that look like? And I think, and I don't know if this is going to address what you're stating, but when we have something like Happy built, I think now the onus is on the individuals. Like, they have the numbers, they can go do what they need to do. And it kind of, it switches how services are delivered, you know, in the sense where now you don't have it connected to a given organization. You could use, you know, the phone number to, you know, understand activity and volume, and then connect it to the types of resource categories, and then, you know, do a different kind of reporting. But it really is important for IRCC and iCare to be on the table to understand how AI can impact how they are reported to. Like, it is a very, very complex way to report things. And we're looking at, you know, we're going to be building out reports on a number of different things, but also, you know, connecting increase of confidence based on how conversations go from different categories into employment, and the time that it takes to get to that. You know, maybe they start off only caring about housing, and then they move, you know, in whatever, you know, months or days into employment, and then checking back and seeing in a very conversational way how successful that was, right? And now how do you take text data that way and indicate success? Like, I think it's the report format is still similar, but again, Matthew, great question. I'm thinking about it. I have no idea in terms of how well it can be reported. Maybe that's where Marco and Nick can also add to it. I think it's the same. We have to get folks to look at AI, because I think if we were to release, and that's where if we were to, release something like Happy in the wild and it's being used a lot more than any services, what does that mean? Who's accountable for what Happy is saying? Who's accountable for the computing cost that it takes to run something like this? There's a lot of, because it's an open for public type of service. So great question. I'm still thinking through a lot of that myself. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, I think it's an important question, but it's also something that I think we need to think about. Where does the innovation come from for some of these things? And it isn't necessarily from IRCC, so we shouldn't be waiting to create these kinds of solutions. But I think Shay's right, is that the question then is, how do you advocate and show the numbers, right? I like to use an old example. When I started in the sector, the agency I worked at didn't have funding for a person at the front desk. And if you say that out loud now, it sounds insane, because that's the face of the organization. We were volunteer run at our front desk, and we couldn't get our funders to fund it. So so in her narrative reports, my ED would just add a column saying, this is how many phone calls we got and how many walk-ins we got this month, this month, this month. And that eventually became a half-time funded position. And she kept the column to show just how busy that position was and how important it was, and eventually got the full-time funding. And I think that in the interim, while we shouldn't be waiting for solutions to get funded or come from the government, we should be creating them and then showing them how they can be implemented in an effective way. And if part of the question is the justification for funding, well, if you can show efficiencies that replace staff, I think that's part of the narrative that we send up, that this isn't necessarily an efficiency to replace staff. And for that, I use Access Employment as a really good example. They have a virtual employment resource assistant, which is an online chatbot on their website that does everything from answer questions to start the registration process. It's connected to their CRM, so someone who starts to flow through is automatically entered into their system. And over the last 3 years, when I've seen them present, they went from taking it takes the equivalent of it took 2 to 3 years ago, it replaced the equivalent of 3.5 full-time staff admin time to now 7 full-time staff admin time. They haven't cut 7 full-time staff. Those 7 full-time staff are now doing the work that they were hired to do, which is providing employment services, instead of just, can you tell me your name? How do you spell that? All the administrivia and all the rote stuff. So I think the narrative is also, how are these tools helping us to actually do the work, to scale things up more, to perhaps serve more clients and make time for us to serve clients who may not be technologically enabled. Like Nick can say 80% of services are going to be tech enabled. That still leaves 20% not, right? That still leaves us 1 in 5 of your clients will not be interacting with you via technology, for example, and that's significant. So it's all part of that narrative as well. I think that we have to use the data and the information in a meaningful way to advocate for what we need. Nick, dive in.
I think what you said is right, and Marco, a lot of people can disagree with the 80%, but if you look at the way time has shown us change, it's better for us to know that and start getting together on getting prepared for that. Shay's example of Happy is a prime example. What I talked about, creating products and creating systems based on feedback that you're receiving. Why you're using cell phone is because that's the lowest common denominator. It becomes so easy. Now there are other programs which are available out there, WhatsApp, etc. It's there, but again, that you have the bots. If any one of you have ever dealt with WhatsApp bots, I commiserate with you. Half our job is throwing people out of the program, and having something that what Shay has created, which now I like the terminology she was using, the words that were being used. I understand that you can feel interest, and I think you're talking about it, and that's great. These are all such well-crafted words. So Shay, hats off to you on that. That in itself is an art. And so, how do we use all of this? Matthew was asking, how can this be used for the settlement? I'm so happy to hear that, because that is exactly what we are talking about today. How can we start using tools and not get scared by them?
Yeah, and thank you, Nick. And I think I don't think Matthew's scared of tools. I know he's not, but I think he's raising an important point, which is how do we make sure that that we don't get defunded, unfunded based on the use of innovative tools? And I think that's an important conversation for us to be having, which is why we need these kinds of conversations. So, follow up to that, I'm gonna. Is there a human loop at any point in the service design? So, for example, are there ways to have a three-way conversation that brings in a settlement advisor? And I'm going to say, obviously not in the iteration when it's text messaging, Shay, but is that something that...
But there is. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
Well then, hey.
Yeah.
Even better.
I just for the time I didn't put in, but the way that we've built the system is there are check-ins. So there are dynamic check-ins based on conversation that the AI will initiate itself. And depending on the severity, we loop in individuals. So one of the examples that we're hoping to get into is looking at First Nation policing, for example. So there's a lot of the times that you have within Indigenous communities an elder, a family member, and then maybe someone within a more structured government type environment. So with a system like this, what we would do is we would have a triage. So we would then initiate and connect with an elder who can maybe go talk to the individual that is using our system. And this is, again, like the consent. I think there was a question on privacy that I can address right after. But depending, again, on severity, we have a check-in built in. So we're actually testing a lot of that so that there is that human in the loop and there is that engagement. Because a lot of the times when you go towards more mental health than resource navigation, you want to make sure that you have flags in place to, AI can only do so much, but it can show up and save your life. Like, we're not saying that we can do any of this, right? So we need to be able to put a flag in to help figure that out if that's even needed. So we are putting that into that system. And as of now, we do not collect any personal information. Depending on the pilot that we're working with and the client we're working with and how far-fetched the use of Happy is, we may include getting, your name to make it more personal so that there's a bigger bond. For example, within FASD, if you have folks that are at a level of grade 3 comprehension, having, that personal connection with a name is important in using the AI. So it goes back to who are we building the AI for? If they are, if we're building it for folks of different sort of development needs, then we need to consider how to personalize it for them. So it all goes back into looking at the guardrails by organization and building it into the tool, which we can do, right? So there's always the standard guardrails of all information is in Canada, all of those things, but then we can become even more specific depending on the client that we're working with, right? And that's for every person looking into development. You can have that specificity so that you're ensuring ethical conversations are happening with your tool.
It leads to a good question that I think you've partially answered now, that's in the chat about privacy and confidentiality of information. So how do you ensure client information is secured in that interaction? And it sounds like part of it is by not asking for too much. But what are some other ways?
Yeah, no, for sure, Marco. Don't ask a lot, give more than take. I think that's a huge part of any type of technology is you provide a ton of value and only take information to improve the experience. So I talked about having the name, but maybe you get a location because you realize your client doesn't have a car and they need to walk. Maybe you ask a little bit more about their health because you realize the client may have a limp, so they can't walk too much, or you need to figure out other services to help them get to the point of the service provider. So enough information to have the most customized AI answer. But you start with little information. I think that's why working with organizations that have that expertise, you have seen countless different individuals come through your doors requiring service. So one of the slides I didn't show is like building personas using AI. You're able to already categorize what are the different individuals coming in, what are their patterns and behaviors, and using that instead of individual data to be able to train your model. So then you're using your aggregate to train for the individual. And in that way, you don't need a lot of data. If the person has a family, they're going to need something that's a bit bigger and with easier transport, just for example, right? So each organization has those patterns per persona already developed with the data that they have. So many ways to, make sure you're not taking too much information from the get-go. So, yeah.
That's great. And you've answered some of the questions here from David, but he raises a good question. Now, this is an SMS text system, but what about agents like Happy with where folks perhaps with other limited literacy skills can use verbal inputs, both to provide as well as to receive the information? Is that something that you see coming down the pipeline with services like this?
Yeah. So, for example, the service that we're using, and I know Nick's pretty familiar with this, is Twilio is great. Like Twilio is an addition to your core technology, and all it does is really facilitates that WhatsApp, text message, phone call type of models so that you're able to deliver information through these different mechanisms. So we are looking at building audio modules, and at the moment you can use your phone. If you have an advanced enough phone, you can use it, the speech to text and text to speech within the phone with this AI model as is. But we're also looking at building, a number you can call, because as we continue to progress, and I think 10 years down the line, you're going to have a lot of different agents. And I think each of us may have an agent servicing things on our behalf, making calls on our behalf. And that all comes into place with these very advanced audio modules that are coming in, right? So we're going to be adapting that for sure.
Yeah, so the possibilities. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I see we've got a lot of settlement agencies over here. So I just want to get a show of hands. How many of you have already started? Have you commenced using digital services, and what percentage is it? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 50%? It would be good to get to know from you, because the need is severe. I heard earlier in the summer that some settlement agencies, it took 6 months to even get in to see a settlement agency. So again, obviously, the digital part is a huge opportunity. Anyone wants to talk about how many of them are using it and what are their challenges?
That's a great segue into our breakout rooms. But if anyone wants to jump out right now, because we've only got about 30 minutes left, this has been a really great conversation, but I want to give people more opportunity to interact. If someone wants to unmute and dive in a little bit here, or we'll pause for a second, we can jump into the breakout rooms, and that'll be part of the conversation. Amani, go ahead, please.
I'm happy to share Northwest London Resource Centre. We're in London, Ontario, and I think, Nick, you came to London, I think many years ago, and many years ago, and it was a great presentation. So it's wonderful to be part of this session, because I was like, I know Nick, back in 2000, I think I want to say 12 or so. So
Yes.
thank you. I wanted to say that Northwest London Resource Centre got funding on April 1st, 2020. When everybody closed their offices and there's no any in-person sessions. And the only way we can be able to support, and this is our brand new funded agency, brand new into IRCC, and we have a pandemic. So the only way we were able to support services was us going 100% digital. And this is when we knew about Zoom and Teams and what do we need to, and WhatsApp, not just the messaging, but broadcast, and as well as QR codes and how we can be able to put our posters so that way they can. So at that time, we stayed 100% digital, as you were talking about, but we were responsive. So that way, no one waited 6 months to see us. How can we be able to connect? So digital actually saved our funding so we can be relevant and support a lot of newcomer who just arrived a month before the pandemic or 2 months before the pandemic, and they still needed the support. I can tell you, as the pandemic kind of slowed down or reduced, then we were in person more. So now, are we at 50%? No. I can tell you it's much less now digital, because we're still seeing a lot of people are coming in, but we still give the option of, do you want to connect over Zoom? Do you want to do any of those meetings, whatever it may be? We still have those options, but not as compared to first year, second year.
Yeah, no, we are hearing the same thing, and this is where, what does the 10-year mark look like, Amani? Is it going to be, I'm saying 80% digital. I love publishing. I published a magazine, as you know, and all of that is gone. So publishing is gone, books are gone. People read everything online. So, but it is change, and change is coming. But thank you, thank you. Anyone else wants to make a comment on that? Love to hear from the stakeholders out there. No?
Well,
Alice. Alice is there. Alice Calmettes. God, I'm gonna ask you to speak, Alice. No. I think
Yeah, Lucy, Lucy, go ahead. Sorry, Nick.
yeah, I manage a link program. So we are part of a settlement agency. And during COVID, of course, we had to go online. So our classes, the majority of them are back in person, but some people have decided that they still want online classes, especially higher level, because many of our clients, they have jobs. Their priority is not learning English. And even to come see a settlement worker, it's not always convenient. So they want online classes. So right now we have the majority of our classes in person, but we have to keep the digital literacy as part of it, using the LMS avenue, and even teaching them how to type, or identify the ABCs, of course, because the majority of our students right now are literacy. So we are looking now how to use AI. We haven't started using it yet, but the Language Assessment Center in Toronto, the YMCA, has started, or I guess it's through Achieve, for Hearts, has started using technology to send messages to students who are on the wait list. And the problem with that is that I had a client come in today showing me the message on her phone, but it's to show she's on the wait list. And she came here thinking she was in class. So, many of them, even if it was in their own language, they wouldn't even be able to read, because they said they've never attended school. So, it's good that they will send them, they do the language assessment, they will get the message on their phone, but it's asking them if they want to stay on the wait list, and then they will get a follow-up message later on, which is great, but it's a little confusing right now for the newcomers.
Thank you for sharing, Lucy. I mean, that goes back to some of the questions that that I think David brought up, which is that there's multiple levels of literacy within our communities, and that how do you plan and build for that? And it can be very complex, for sure. Just to let you know, Nick, Suki Sandhu posted in the chat.
I saw her comment, yeah.
Virtual services work for us well. The majority of our clients are single moms who access our services while their kids are at home or sleeping. So that idea of multitasking, right? And finding that time.
I get that all the time. They're trying to, do a whole lot of things. And I think Alice has come back and she's got a hand up. Alice, how are you doing? Welcome.
Hi, Nick. It's been a while. So I'm the manager for the Integrating Newcomers program, and we're a pre-arrival service for the construction industry specifically. So we're fairly technical. And for us, because we're only pre-arrival, we've always been only digital. So when the pandemic hit, we didn't have to switch because we were already only online. And so it has worked really well for us. We haven't yet included any really AI. Like, the team uses AI to make sure that the resources we send are updated and do some research and some reformatting, etc., based on language levels, but we haven't yet included anything that sort of automatically answers to client, etc., mostly because we are a fairly small program at this point in terms of number of clients that we handle, a number of clients that we can take into the program, and the type of clients we work are fairly technical, and so it does still require a human eye to see if they would be a good fit for us. It's not just a straightforward, you're an engineer, you come in kind of thing. But we are thinking of how to include AI in the future. And we haven't really made a decision yet because it depends on a lot of factors. English level is usually not an issue for us because most of our clients come from fairly highly educated, 10, 15 years of experience. And so we haven't encountered any issue with English, but we also, the type of clients we work with will shift based on the new immigration changes and to focus on the trades, etc., which will bring a whole different type of clients to us. So we'll have to adapt to this as well. And we've kept the door open as a team just to see how we can include it. We haven't come across something that makes a lot of sense to us yet, but we are open to ideas. And so we're definitely listening to what the conversation is about this, and seeing how we can include it in the future.
Thanks, Alice. Before I get to you, Shay, I wanted to ask Suki, I saw that you had opened your camera. So was there something you wanted to add to your question in your comment in the chat before we move on?
No, that was pretty much it. Yeah, practically, like we've seen, we haven't used any artificial intelligence. We haven't done anything with the chat bots, but just even for, clients coming in and accessing services, as Nick mentioned, a lot of people want to move forward, but they're not able to juggle it all. And, sometimes for the clients that we serve, taking 3 kids under 5 with you to a settlement appointment might not be doable, right? The kids have their own schedule. A lot of times people are in English classes. A lot of times there's pick up and drop off at school. There's a lot going on, but people do definitely want to integrate into the community and society. And for clients who have some tech skills, it can just be as easy as opening Zoom and being able to get those services. And, after the pandemic, we've learned not everything is necessary in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to, Dina, thanks for sharing. Dina just shared a link that was shared in at one of the live sessions called Translate Live. Can you give us if you feel comfortable, Dina, can you unmute and just give us a quick overview of how it was presented and why, how it's potentially a useful tool?
Hi there. Yes.
Awesome.
So the session that was on yesterday was called AI in Service Delivery, Envisioning Tomorrow. So it was put on by Options Community Services in BC. And so they showed us an interpretation device. And I think it was called Alia, if I'm not mistaken. I was looking for the name in my notes. But it basically, for those of you who are old enough to remember, there was a game called Battleship where, you're sitting across from somebody and there's like 2 sides to this thing where people were like making up ships. So it looks like that. I think it was able to interpret 250 languages. And so you just sit across from someone, and you would speak and it would come out on the other end, in the language that the other person, so in English or whichever. And so one of the questions that I posed yesterday at the end of the session was whether or not we were looking at an interface to have that on our computers to be safe if it was a password protected course. And the answer was yes. So the company Translate Live is from Florida, actually. And so they partnered with the organization in Surrey to transform their device into one that would reflect settlement requirements. So it's a very interesting development, but ongoing development. So yeah, for now it's a device that's like physical, but they're also working right now to develop it to have as an interface online.
Interesting. Super interesting. Thank you for sharing that, all these different innovations. So curious that's a big conversation about translation, interpretation, and removing the human, or how do you ensure that those translations are accurate? So that's something to dive into, but it's Options that's experimenting with it. Is that right?
Yes, and there's been a lot of testing and a lot of so corrections, like calibration. So what they have right now is a process. The one the one thing that they recommended, number one, is anybody who's a project manager that is interested in this, in concurrent to actually setting it up, you have to actually come up with a policy. So there's an actual policy as to when they can use the device and when a human being has to come in. So for example, they're not using it for healthcare with clients, or so there are certain parameters in which you use it. You would never use it in a situation where what was interpreted could be perceived incorrectly and could be, put a client at risk. So there's various policies that have been written to accompany the use of it. So it's really, really interesting.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, that idea of guardrails that I think, Shay, you've mentioned is so important in this conversation. And that's really good to hear that they're saying, okay, maybe don't use this at a moment during a medical interpretation when, the risk of potential patient harm is very high if something is mistranslated, but it could be used in a different way. There was a project from years ago from Victoria. The name escapes me, the Victoria Multicultural Association or something along those lines, where they used Google Translate as a tool, as a good enough tool to create welcoming communities, where they would train local businesses on how to use Google Translate to get the gist of a conversation with someone, and then give them decals that they could put on their door so someone knew. And it said, "We Speak Translate" was the name of the project. And it gave people a sense that, oh, this organization is welcoming to me if I don't speak English, and they're willing to use Google Translate so we can at least have a conversation with each other. And it's that idea of what's good enough in that circumstance, in that moment, recognizing the limitations of the technology, but using it in a way that can help facilitate inclusion a little bit. So this sounds like that, but on steroids.
Yeah, and Marco, I would just add, I think, one of the things I think you should also maybe consider within policy, or just the folks that may use something like this, is how do you evaluate your current translators? I think when you look at AI evaluation, you need to go back and see, how am I doing valuation on the human counterpart of what I'm converting AI to? And is it as stringent or not? What are our biases in evaluating AI versus our biases in evaluating human beings? Because this is something I'm coming across with when you look at evaluation within the justice system, of how do you evaluate what a good parole officer may be, or how do you evaluate a good settlement worker? You may have your own criteria, but it might just be very outcomes based, but not exactly the interactions at the level of what you're saying. What are you recommending? So that needs to be considered when we build these tools as well, right? Is how do we evaluate ourselves? So
if I can, I'll add one last little piece of humor. And so the advice was also that we should all have a little bit of humor when we're interacting and correcting these devices. And so one of the things that happened was the organization was called something like in there was Settlement BC, and it came in the interpretation as a settlement before Christ. So they were just saying, it's also important to have some fun and have a little bit of humor when you're interacting and developing this. There's, whether it's a human being or a machine, none of us are infallible. So it's having a spirit of curiosity and adventure while being careful and having some humor in there.
That curiosity and that carefulness, because you mentioned that idea of having policies, of understanding how you're going to use the technology and the limitations of the technology, and when not to use the technology, are all equally important to having a spirit of innovation and playfulness. And I think that's a really important message for folks to hear. You can play, but you got to play responsibly, right?
Yeah. And Marco, if we have, are we going to do the breakout rooms?
We are not. No, we got 15 minutes left. So we're in the thick of it here. We're going to just have some more fun here.
Yeah, no, okay, fair enough. I just wanted to comment upon what Alice was saying before Dina jumped in on sometimes the complexity and the smaller user base. So when you have tasks that are complex, it may not make sense to use AI, but I just wanted to share an example. So one of the other projects I've done is we're working within the professional regulation space. And so we're working with a regulator to look at their standards of practice and how are we responding to public and registrant inquiries. So when you look at the nature of regulation, it is complex. There's a lot of liability if you are giving advice that is incorrect. So how do you navigate all of that complexity? So if you have, for example, Alice, good enough data with your team of, response inquiries, you're capturing all of that information, that can be taken into developing models, right? And it will understand that nuance, it will understand that complexity, and it's going to help maybe even see gaps that you might have not seen because it's doing a pattern recognition across all of the conversations you've had. So we've seen that, and we're building pieces of it. So at times it's good to start even with more complex projects, because when you lay out all the complexity in a project, you're covering all your bases, and then it's easier to adapt it for simpler things. So this is just things I've noticed again with projects working on right now.
Yeah, thank you, Shay. Very, very useful. Alice, did you want to address the question in the chat?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's something we've discussed as a team. So do we see a problem with AI reformatting resumes, essentially? For us, it's kind of both. It could be an advantage and a problem. It's an advantage when we get resumes, depending on the cultures, but we get resumes which are 15 pages. And in the construction industry, if you have more than 2 pages, that's it. Like, your resume won't be read at all. So sometimes we tell clients, you need to reformat your resume, and you can use AI for that. And that's definitely an advantage because we get to the sort of final product faster. We do have to be a bit careful about misrepresentation. And so what we usually do as a team is if we ask clients, if you use AI, it's totally fine with us, just let us know so we know what to do and like how to look at the resume, just to make sure. And then we help clients with asking questions that sort of only the human right now can know. And like, I'm not saying that AI can't do it in the future, maybe it can, and I'm interested to hear. But right now we ask lots of questions that are fairly technical because the employment liaison specialists that our clients work with are from the construction industry. And because we're an employer association, we come with that background of knowing what employers are looking for and what kind of technical skills. And I think from what I've seen right now and talking to the team, I don't think AI can do that yet. It might be able to in the future, but it is definitely something that for the technical part, we feel still that the human has a better advantage than AI. And it might change in the future, and it is a discussion we have at the team saying our role might be irrelevant in a couple of years because of that. What can't be replaced for now, for us at least, is because we're an association of employer, we can bring an employer on board and have a conversation and use our network to present a client to a specific employer saying, okay, we've worked with this client, this employer will be a good fit. We can reach out to employer and sort of do the relationship piece. And that's really, I think, the strengths of the program. And like, listening yesterday to Nick and Marco's presentation about, what employment services should look like, etc. This is what we already do in the program. Because we know that's the most effective, the networking, etc. So we focus on that. And as a team, we said, if we have to sort of give up the more technical piece and the resume writing, etc., because AI can do it better than us, then we can focus on the employer piece, which ultimately is really what clients need the most. And so we're happy to do that if we see that. So far, we haven't seen a way that AI does it sort of better than what we do, also because we have a skill assessment report within the program that's done by a construction professional that, goes into which product did you use? Did you use Procore? Did you use this software? Did you do this one? Did you do, okay, you build a road, but which part, what kind of, so all of these questions that right now we haven't seen something that AI can do similar, but if there is a way to do that with AI, then we can focus on the relationship piece with the employer, which is really where we come in as an association of employers across the country.
Thanks, Alice. And Kemo, apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name. If that, oh, okay, appreciate it. You posted. If there's any follow-up, let us know. We've got 10 minutes left. So Nick, I'm going to let you speak, and then I'm going to let others chime in if they have any questions or thoughts they want to share.
I'm gonna throw a gauntlet out there. All of you are here all of you are trying to work with employers. Imagine if you could create one program that you could all feed your clients into, and it was connected with all the employers. It's just so simple. But every settlement agency has got their own one created. It's not necessary. And this is where I'm talking about innovation. This is the kind of innovation that's needed for us to grow from where we were 20 years ago to where we can go 20 years from now. Thanks, Marco, for the chance.
Thanks, Nick. I want to leave it with in our breakout groups if we had gone into them, but we went off the rails. I don't think in a bad way necessarily. A couple of the questions we're looking at: what are some of the issues or challenges that you face, and then we were going to sort of talk through them. So in the last few minutes we have, I know some of you probably came to this session hoping to be able to bring those out and to talk about them, because you're not blank slates in this. Everyone is doing some form of digital service delivery in their organizations and has been for many years. But moving forward, there's still work to be done. So what are some of the things, and Shay put our email addresses in the chat. You're welcome to reach out, but I'm curious if there's questions that we haven't addressed. We've talked a lot about AI, but are there even foundational questions around how do you bring technology into your organization, or specific technology questions that folks wanted to have a go at in this session? You can pop them into the chat, or you can raise a hand and unmute, and we can at least address them, and then perhaps follow up post session with you with some thoughts and resources. Anyone want to dive in?
Marco, there's a question. So it says AI policy. Do you have resources or links to share? Any thoughts there? Yeah.
AI policies. Yeah. I mean, I think Shay, you can start answering, and I will dig up some links.
I think there are general policies on the technical development, and I can, if you put your email in, I can provide some. But I think it is so it's so specific to your organization and the application. So for example, if we're using a ChatGPT, let's say we're using ChatGPT within our organizations, I think the main policy is making sure that it's a team account so that information is not trained on the models. And then the second piece is making sure that we remove personal information from emails and clients when we share with ChatGPT, whether it's to generate a response or create a report or so on. So it, again, depending on the purpose of using a tool like this, any personal information should be removed. But I think overall, if you go into each model or each type of AI, they have their own policies on how they train. So making sure you have someone to review that and then coordinate your policy is, I would say, the policy starter. They make it complicated, but we know how to get through that, I think. So
yeah, I mean, I also would say there's a lot to sort of think about, because when you're talking about AI, you probably don't necessarily have technology policies in some cases, but most of you do. So you want to build on those. You probably have client confidentiality policies. You want to apply everything you already have to an AI policy. And what I shared in the chat is some links to some AI frameworks to help you think about AI policies and responsible AI use in your organization, with examples of organizations that have gone before you. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you don't have to forget everything you already know. Sometimes it's just applying existing policies in that framework, for example. Dina, I'd love to hear if there are people out there currently working on curriculum design or curriculum refreshes and using AI in your curriculum outputs. That's a great question. I know outside of the sector that's happening, but I'm curious if that's as well happening in the sector, if folks want to share how they're using AI in their curriculum design.
Well, for us, so not curriculum design per se, but we do use AI for refreshes for the list of resources that we send to clients to make sure that it stays relevant. All the resources we have are, of course, sector specific, but also region specific. We're a pan-Canada program, so we have clients going anywhere in Canada, and it's a lot to keep track of resources and in every province and every city just to make sure it's updated. So we do use AI for that. It took us a while to figure out as a team how to do it, but I think we've come up with something that works really well. And so we use that, and that has cut our, like it frees up time for something that's more where we have more added value, because updating resources isn't necessarily very it's time consuming. And so we've used that quite successfully. We haven't yet used AI for more in-depth refreshment of what we do. We're looking into it. We're just at the beginning, to be honest. So I'm curious to hear if others have done it successfully, and what does that look like, so we can learn from everybody else too.
For sure. And I put in the answer to your question, Dina, and this might be useful for others, that Dr. Philippa Hardman, who is a scholar at Cambridge University, a former chief learning officer, she is doing a lot of work around instructional design and AI, including running some experiments. I think she ran one where it was just AI itself doing it, instructional designers doing it, and instructional designers using AI. And what they found was instructional designers and AI gave a little bit of a better result. But that's assuming the instructional designer are themselves literate in how they're prompting AI, for example. So there are some great experiments out there that I think can be really interesting and useful for the sector to look at as well. One big question from Amani: what are some effective digital tools that other agencies use and would recommend sharing aside from ChatGPT? I'm assuming you mean AI tools, but if not, there are a ton of tools out there that
I think, oh, sorry,
No,
Marco.
go
I
ahead,
just
go ahead.
wanted to, I know you're going to find the link to maybe a summarization, but one of the things that I found that works really well is if you add a meeting AI note taker to your individual meetings, whether it's with clients or across whatever meetings you're having, the capabilities now are it can review, it can create themes, it's able to transcribe everything really well, and you're able to keep track of a lot of that information, especially if you're doing research related things or you're trying to understand what are the call to actions, but do it very quickly. So if you are doing a lot of that meeting virtually, that is a very easy way to get yourself to accelerate.
For sure. And we've got less than a minute left, but I threw a link in the chat because there are a lot of issues that come up with AI note takers that common to what Shay talked about earlier around guardrails, around consent, around who's going to use the recording, around the privacy of the tool that you're using. This isn't just an issue in our sector, for example. AI scribes are a big thing that's being experimented with in the medical sector in Ontario, for example, and all of these things are important pieces. It goes back to, again, the guardrails and the foundations and the policies. We need to think through, if I use this tool, does everyone know why I'm using it, how I'm using it, what's happening with their data, even what happens with the data on the tool itself, for example, and how is that data being used to train their AI, for example? And if it is, I mean, that presents a whole host of issues. So we're wrapping up. So Shay and Nick, if you have any 30-second last ideas or comments you want to share before we let everyone go, please jump in.
Go ahead, Nick. I feel like I've been talking a lot.
This is the first. Me talking less. Okay. I think this is the start of a big, great conversation. The thing is, I think when we go back to to the actual subject, and that is, what does digital transformation look in the settlement sector, past, present, and futures. I think we've got a lot of different perspectives. I'm sure everyone has them, and some of them you're not talking about it. But the point is this: I think the reason why Marco created this one is because he wants to start people thinking about it. At least if you're if you're starting to think about it, you come up with questions, and hopefully, we call Marco the godfather of all these questions, so he can field the questions. I know one thing: he won't let your email go unanswered, and I'm sure he'll put you in touch with the right kind of people. And that's what you need. You need to start creating those collaborations so that you can learn more and you can create a better program. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add, it's maybe don't wait and watch. it's important to know and look at what are the best ways to use things, but every organization is so unique, your data is unique, and your application is unique. So it's important to go ahead and try and then learn as you try. I think that's a big piece of anything digital is your attempts and enforcing it internally. Yeah.
Thank you, Shay. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope
Thank
this
you,
was a fun, interesting conversation. You've got our email addresses. We're always happy to field your questions, and let's keep this conversation going. I think this is an essential conversation for us to be having across the sector. There's tons of information. A lot of you we didn't get to in terms of what you're doing, what you're working on, but I know you all have knowledge in this area, so please share it with other folks around the sector and connect with each other. But thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of the
Thanks.
conference.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Marco, too. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you,
Take care,
everyone.
everybody.